Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
Every job in the fire service is a privilege. We get to go into people's homes and we see people when they are just when they are breaking or broken, and you think, I have been chosen, given the opportunity to help, and that's a privilege. If we just take the context of the here and now, when we think about the investment in our operational improvements and competence, we're brilliant. And if you think about it then in the context of cultural improvement and people's personal development, more kind of their emotional intelligence, and I think we're woeful because, have we actually sat down and gone, right, George Floyd incident, Black Lives Matters. Why is that important to the fire service? Misogyny. Does anybody know what it means?
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. Kathryn, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, but thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on. I mean, it's astonishing how many people we speak to, but when it comes to coming on the podcast, public speaking is globally the number one fear. And I know as a Chief Fire Officer, it's almost an expectation of your role, but I wonder if that's maybe a nice place for us to start, because the ever-changing role of the firefighter and what we do in the community and the people that we serve, a lot of it involves a lot of speaking now, a lot of going to community events, a lot of stand and deliver. But given someone that's reached the heights of a senior leadership team, did you ever actually receive any kind of formal training in that sort of thing? I know it's a weird place to start. We'll cycle back to your sort of journey into the fire service, but I thought we'd start there maybe.
So the answer is no. And I was, so there's a couple of things that I think about when we talk about kind of public speaking. And, you're exactly right. I do. I get invited to lots of things now, like local award ceremonies and bits and pieces. And so there's a few bits. I think if I think back to, and I literally only thought about this morning, not because of the podcast, but because of something else actually. So when I was at primary school, one of my best performances that I can remember was dancing to Fame, and in a pink leotard and tutu, and I just was like living my best life, really.
You and I had the both same experience. I can't believe it. That's so surreal. I thought it was just me. Why, thank goodness.
And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it popped into my head today was because of Rishi Sunak's review of university, and I thought, oh wow, yeah, that took me to the School of Arts and Entertainment in America, Fame, and then I remember me dancing around in tutu. So yeah, I never kind of minded. And public speaking was something not necessarily public, but I can remember doing my English exam for kind of for oral communication.
Yeah.
And I did it on the workings of a heart, and I just had the best life. I was really very animated, very visual. And then I do have to remember that. So when my father passed away, my sister and myself, because again, we do a lot of talking. I thought, do you know what? I just want to go to the funeral. Let somebody else deliver the eulogy and just kind of relax.
I love funerals in a weird way, but I hate when someone is not a good. Sometimes, like, we cop out, don't we? And we ask the vicar or the whoever to do it. But I'm like, this person's had an incredible life. How sad is it if someone's not able to be? I don't know, it's very emotive and all that sort of jazz. But you're right. I find them an occasion to celebrate things, but it's a bit weird, I think.
Well, totally. So I copped out. We copped out. And we were literally walking into the church, and the kind of, and to be fair, the vicar was a really good friend of my father's, so it's like, oh, brilliant, just it'll be fine. And he looked and went, oh, have you got the eulogy? I went, what? So I looked to my
No.
sister, and he said, oh yeah. And my sister said, oh, we've emailed it to you. So, oh no, I've not got it. So I mean, we are literally walking in behind my
God.
dad's coffin, and it was brilliant because I literally looked at my sister and went, it's fine, we'll wing it. And she went, Dad is going to be absolutely wetting himself that we've got to do this. So as we're walking in, the funeral director's going, you can't wing it. And what we did was we just tried to like write a few bits on it was literally like a tissue that we had.
Yeah.
And I said to my sister, don't worry about it. And what I then did was stood up and almost, there was some bits I could remember that people wanted to say. And I literally went around the room, like picking out people and going, oh, yeah, and then like this. And then, and literally almost a bit of audience participation. Oh, yeah, can you remember Dad used to do this? Remember when Dad used to play euchre? Remember when Dad worked at Sweb? And I came away from that going, and it's always a thing now. I go, if you can stand up at, your dad's funeral and crack out a winging it presentation of his life in probably one of the times when it really matters, and speak passionately and from the heart, then you can do it anytime. So
that's the irony, though, isn't it? Because people say when you speak and stuff like that, they just say, "Oh, just be yourself, Kathryn." But isn't it ironic in like the digital age? I mean, I was reading a survey recently that said 74% of millennials preferred conversing digitally rather than in person. And our communication abilities, that like the more people use digital communication, the more their interpersonal communication skills decline. Yeah. And we have this insatiable desire for rapid communication. But when I think people say, oh, just be yourself, that's kind of counter to what we're also being conditioned with, because most of the world says be yourself. And then the next sentence they say, no, not like that. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of perpetuates that fear of our ability to just communicate. I also think that's led to the population of things like podcasting, because we're like traveling a desert of communication, looking for people who are engaging with each other, listening actively, paraphrasing, really caring what the other person's saying.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that was, I suppose, when we go into the bit around how did I end up in this position, I think if it was genuinely having, and don't get me wrong, obviously there's a degree of having to be professional, and I've had coaching around being professional, but it's genuinely what you see is what you get. I've always said that if I'm going to do this job, it'll be the authentic me, because I can't be anything else. I don't.
I love that though, but there's also an aspect of, because I'm gonna circle that, bookmark it, and come back to that aspect of coached and being professional, because sometimes that comes with connotations of sterilization. And what I mean by that is I've been told at times when I'm presenting, because you did a lot of work in training, didn't you? I know part of your career was spent in the training department. And I always say to people that, look, don't look at the presentation. I mean, look at it and do a bit of prep. But I mean, when you're presenting, don't use it. Don't look at it, because you're not just reading from a thing. You are the filter through which all of this travels. I could read your website, Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service. It's just words. Do you know what I mean? This is again why I think podcasting is so celebrated, because it doesn't have context, it doesn't have layers, it doesn't have color. They're not seeing all of the emotion, the passion, the sincerity that lies behind Kathryn, that lies behind her station officer, team, her firefighters, her community educators, everything that goes into that. We lose all of that context, sometimes under the guise of desire to be more professional. People hear professional and they bring less of themselves to work at times.
No, and that and it's interesting you say that, because I went on a course, and last year actually, and what they talk a lot about, and it's a theoretical thing as well. They talk about the public servant narrative, public sector narrative, and what it talks about is, I mean, what am I in my role? I'm a leader. I have to basically not only get up every day and motivate myself, which is quite easy, but I'm there to provide safety, security, support, and motivation for the people in Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service and beyond. And they talk to you they talked in this particular piece of the course about what's your story, what's your narrative? What's the thing that you're going to use to like rally the troops?
Mm.
And that was probably the time that I went, do you know what? I can use my story. My story isn't exactly mind blowing or very,
Not to you, because you were there for all of it.
yeah,
But
true.
this is what I always say. Every time I
Yeah,
speak to someone about a podcast, they're like, "Oh, but I'm not very interesting." I'm like, "Yeah, not to you, because
yeah,
you were there for all of it." But
yeah.
I guarantee, like you right now, you are the hero of your story. You're the hero of your story last 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Who you are now, you'd have
Oh,
killed probably to have
oh,
been that person. I'm not saying your life has been
absolutely.
without challenges or that perhaps
Yeah.
you're not even experiencing challenges right now, but you're the hero of so many people's stories that you probably never even meet.
Yeah. No, and that's true. But I think the bit that particular course gave me was that opportunity to go, do you know what? That's your story. And you're right in the context of like delivering training or delivering messages or whatever it is. It's about anyone can read it or write it or but it's about bringing it to life.
Mm.
It's about the inspiration. It's
Mm.
about making it practical for people. It's about making it making those words or making that event a real lived experience for people.
Well, we learn from the parable, don't we? We learn from the story. It's how the Bible was. I mean, I'm not no disrespect to any religious context, but it's why the Bible was one of the reasons the Bible was so prolific, and any religious book really, because they're built around stories. We
Yeah,
learn values, we learn morals through stories. You know, you can read some of these great charity websites and it says, "Oh, 7 million children died last year," and you go, "Oh, that's really sad." But if they say, "Let me tell you the story of Malala Yousafzai," you go, "Wow,
yeah,
oh my God." Do you know what I mean? And that's one person, but every single one of those 7 million people will have a similar story with different peaks and troughs and challenges and unbelievably gut wrenching experiences that we could never envisage as going through and even surviving. But we have to learn from the story. And I think people's reluctance sometimes to put themselves in the story. And again, like a broken record, I echo back to the podcast. It's like, look, people aren't going to read the corporate article. They don't. They want to hear you. They want their pound of flesh. They want to know, how Kathryn made it through that journey, because I think it's so insulting to think we could summarize your life in 2 paragraphs. I find that very insulting, to be honest with you. I know some people are restricted to that context,
yeah.
but I'm like, there's so much more to that person than 2 paragraphs.
I might try that later. I might try and tweet my whole life on Twitter through the medium of, what is it, the 200 characters or whatever.
I just, but even I think they slowly increased it over the years. I don't
Yeah,
know
they
much
have.
about,
Yeah,
because they're
yeah,
like, people want the context.
yeah.
There's an appetite for the greater long form. But to circle back there, because I find this really interesting thing. Some of the courses you've gone on will have been so eye-opening, so professionally and personally revealing and developing. But what I do find sad sometimes is that for most individuals who have reached the level that you have now risen to, they don't get those kind of opportunities. Well, they do, but they have to seek them out personally. They are not encouraged or imposed upon them professionally until they reach a certain level. And I think that the most impactful and sometimes people that have the greatest effect on the ground groups level are those firefighters, crew managers, crew commanders, leading firefighters in the infancy of their leadership, who can have the biggest impact on our cultures. But sometimes, and I don't know with your own service, and feel free to color in the detail, but it's like we don't do as much of the soft skills training. We're getting better at it as our awareness of EDI rises and we recognize culture and emotional intelligence as things we need to give greater context and attention to. But my personal views, Pete Wakefield's personal view, I still think we've got a tremendous way to go to help people develop more than that one-dimensional operational skill set.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think the interest, so I'll kind of go back to my story, and that is so my main body of coaching I did personally in the so I kind of sought out just because I ended up kind of meeting a couple of people really that talk quite highly about coaching, and arguably you could call it counselling at the end of the day. I'm
Mm.
certainly not going to sit here and move into the realms of what it was that I ended up having.
Mm.
And I did loads of different things. I did went through a little stage just before my 40s, funnily enough, where I, it's like lost my parents and doing things, and I really reached that stage of almost like, why do I do the things I do? Went through that pattern of coaching, and I went
Mm.
through homeopathic coaching, those different
Wow.
things. I went and did it's called a landmark forum course in London, to kind of seek out like the power of now, and again read loads of books, and probably
I
wasn't
love that.
until
I did the
yeah,
similar journey in a different way. Mine came after addiction and other aspects. I had some great coaches and sponsors, and being the eternal addict, I then went down the rabbit hole of personal development, NLP. I did all the Tony Robbins stuff. Went on various different personal development courses and really bought the farm with all of that.
yeah. And it wasn't until, I mean, it took years. It
Mm.
took probably 7 or 8 years, and I ended up with a coach, and yeah, it just ended up really kind of just doing a few sessions with her as a favor for somebody else, and yeah, she's now yeah, she is a coach that I've used quite a bit, especially in my progression, and especially to get to kind of the chief level. But I can remember just that whole thing, and I always sit there and go, goodness me, do you know what? Take everything out of the school curriculum and go get yourself a coach or a
I
counselor.
know.
That's because you just think, if you know, we all have things that we take with us in life, and actually things that then prevent you from living
Oh yeah.
that
The
best
story
life.
you're telling yourself and the blueprint and the
Oh
anchors
yeah.
that got embedded so early on. And we're not for 1 minute, 'cause my sister's a deputy head for a primary school. We're not for 1 minute bashing the education system because
Oh
people do that
no.
all the time.
No, no, no.
And that we're operating out of a context that is very old and it's still trying to progress and it's constantly innovating. And my daughter's just turned 11, so she just finished primary school. But that framework was built for a different time. It was built for a different type of industry, and it was
Absolutely.
all
Yeah.
done with the best of intentions. But again, if we knew what we knew now, we'd have done a little bit different. And we're all on that journey as educators, and especially you within the training center as well. I'd love to speak to us in a little bit about that aspect of adult education and how we are actually training firefighters as well. But you're right. Some of the gaps that got left from not developing some of those emotional muscles early on in a different sort of context left us with a lot of scars, which I do think hold people back sometimes their entire
Yeah.
life.
No, yeah, yeah, completely. And I think then, so you know, so that was the best thing that kind of ever happened to me, really, because it then allowed me, and I probably I wouldn't say disengaged, I just mooched through my career for probably 2.5 years while I went on my little journey of you know, self-indulgence and self
Super
finding.
important though. I always say to
Oh,
people,
it
you've got to work
was,
twice
yeah.
as hard on yourself as you do on the job. You are your greatest asset. You've got to keep working on
Completely,
yourself
yeah.
always.
So and it took yeah, you know, it probably took a lot of time and a lot of money to be able to genuinely, and people kind of sometimes look at you and go, oh, that's a bit, but you know, genuinely, I really do love who I am. I mean, I'm hilarious. It's brilliant. But I think, but that's, you know, don't get me wrong. I sit here and go, God, it's taken me, like I said, a lot of time. It's taken me 50, but it took me about 45 years to be able to say that. And you think,
Mm.
that's sad. You know,
It
that's
is, isn't it? But
so
I don't
sad.
think we're born that way. I always say to people, if you look at children up to the age of three or four, usually, like they're in the bedroom. I remember my daughter, and she would go and kiss the mirror. She'd go and kiss the mirror and look at it and love it, and she is just infatuated with herself. And there's almost an enormous sense of self-belief as well. If you go in a class of children at 5 years of age, in year one, and you go, "Who's the strongest?" They'll all put their hands up. You
Yeah.
go, "Who's the fastest? Who's the smartest?" And they'll all put their hands up. But then, sometime in year 4, year 5, if you go back in and say, "Who's the fastest?" they'll go, "Sarah." Sarah's the fast. They almost start to develop an awareness
That
that
ranking of,
limits them. Yeah, they got this
yeah,
ranking. There's like we all start cut, and then we dare not. We kind of put ourselves in a box of I am not the smartest. I am, well, no, because it's the old analogy of judging a frog by its ability to climb a tree, but we
yeah,
label it with I'm not the smartest because I've done a maths lesson. And it turns out John is the best maths person in the class, and maths is the definition of smart. And
yeah.
it's straight. And then we carry that story forever sometimes.
No, totally. Yeah. And then if you can find other people with the same story, then, oh, I'm not good at maths. No, I wasn't either. Oh, brilliant. oh, now,
Yeah.
now it's almost like I belong because there's people here that also aren't good at maths, and
Mm,
then you start to develop. But you're right, because then what you're doing is you're creating
mm,
the boundaries to the possibilities, aren't you?
mm.
But
And also, you're creating more anchors, which sounds a horrible way to refer to friends and people in our inner circle. But if you then start to, develop some self-belief, or you interact with other people that encourage you to explore your once perceived weaknesses, those other people can have a strong disliking to that.
yeah,
Because if you suddenly turn around and go, actually, I don't think I am stupid, I'm going to attempt these few things. Like you said about coaching, some people go, oh, it's a bit woo-woo, Kathryn, but I'm not sure about that. Because if we can belittle it or diminish it or encourage you not to do it, it allows me to validate the fact that I don't want to as well.
yeah, no, absolutely. But back to
Sorry, I told you I'd
no,
take you straight down
yeah,
a rabbit
no,
hole.
don't. I'm
That's my
really bad.
fault.
But I am quite good at bringing it back. So yeah,
You
I
are
do
good.
this a lot.
Sorry.
So back to the investment in our people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've openly say this quite a lot. It is that if we just take the context of the here and now, and we think about the investment in our operational improvements and competence, we're brilliant.
Mm,
National operational guidance, learning from incidents, and I'm sure it's the same across every service,
mm,
training, exercises, new equipment, new procedures, really good stuff. And if you think about it then in the context of cultural improvement and people's personal development,
mm,
more kind of their emotional intelligence and understanding of society and their expectations, I think we're woeful,
mm.
because have we actually sat down and gone, right, George Floyd incident, Black Lives Matters,
Yeah.
why is that important to the fire
Mm.
service? Misogyny, does anybody know what it means? But you're right, it's about, we've done a massive improvement in the amount of kind of well-being
Mm.
work and well-being support and well-being information and
Mm.
training and engagement that we've done with our staff. And it's really interesting because the take up for the last couple of years hasn't, but so we've only started a couple of years ago. It's not been very good.
Mm.
And we kind of said to some firefighters, like, you know, why? And they're like, oh, because it's rubbish. Well, great, yeah, thank you. Well, what
Okay, a little bit more colour for me. Come on.
yeah, what type of stuff do you want? Well, don't know, but not that. Well, great, thank you very much. And
Yeah.
it's that thing of
That's
exactly
firefighters,
that.
isn't it? They don't like the way
Yeah,
things are and they don't like change.
no. So it is about what do how do you, and I think what it's going to take is it's got it you got it we've got to try and move the critical mass. And
I think that's
I think
happening though, because of where we
yeah,
are at in this generational shift. I mean, all over the UK Fire and Rescue Service, and you'll know it far better than me, and the rooms and the meetings you sit within, we're hitting this sort of 30-year rollover, aren't we? To
yeah,
use an
yes,
analogy for Cornwall, it's like the large wave is actually coming in now. It's been drawn out and drawn out and trickles and trickles and trickles. And now there is just where, for better or worse, people look operationally and go, we're hemorrhaging skill sets, we're hemorrhaging experience. Yes, 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 we are. But all these cultural things that we've been trying to do in dribs and drabs, we are now at the crest of that wave, and we must all focus in now, because this is a tremendous opportunity that will only come once in every 30 years.
yeah. And I think if we don't take it, then it will. I keep saying this to um, my service. If we don't make the change, then someone else will come in and do it for us.
That is a
And that
great point.
and that will be the demise of the
It will
British Fire
be. Yeah,
Service.
yeah, yeah.
But what I find really interesting is just with some kind of localized cases really is that it is the gem and I'm generalizing, but
Yeah.
the sometimes the desire to you kind of sit there and go, right, as a group of firefighters, we'll go out and we will turn up to a job and we will absolutely put our lives at risk,
Mm,
um, genuinely to help the most vulnerable people.
mm.
So you then and help the good, I say the good person, but let's kind of talk it in terms of good and
Yeah.
good and bad. So then you come back, sit around the tea table. Oh, that's a really great job. Somebody then says or does or behaves inappropriately. And it's then how do you get, you've just gone out,
Mm.
risk your life.
Mm.
What's stopping somebody in that group going, mate,
Yeah.
that's out of order?
Mhm.
And then what's stopping? So if somebody then calls it out, can nearly, and again, I'm generalizing, but what happens often is you don't then get the swathe of people going, I'm really glad you called that out because I'm right on your, yeah, do you know what? I feel really bad. I should have called it out quicker because I feel really bad that you called it out because I should have called it out. What you
Mm.
then get is that leaving the room and people going up to the person that said the bad thing or done the bad thing, going, well, I think that was a bit out of order. Them, I
Yeah.
think they were over the top having a go at you about that. And it's
Mhm.
like, how does, where is the critical mass siding with the good person rather than
Mm.
siding with the person maybe that that needs support in understanding kind of what's appropriate.
Mm. I
Um,
use that as a framework when I talk about bravery in some of the incident command courses, when we just put that word on the board and we talk about bravery. Like I say, so many of us draw to what would be the obvious and the operational, but where we exhibit elements of cowardice is those social interactions where we all say things that we would do in certain situations, but when the rubber meets the road, there's very few people ready to truly have that. And I think that continues, sort of like as you said before, with this aspect of diminishing ability to have conversations at all, and certainly a
yeah.
diminishing ability to have challenging conversations.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, and I can only see it possibly getting worse with the limited, like you said, skill set or limited interaction of,
Mm.
and also, um, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm sure you've been there, but I've been on watches before where somebody will say something and you literally look around the room and everyone's rolling their eyes and you think,
Mm.
why don't you say anything? Oh, that's how they are. Ooh.
Mm.
And you think, oh, that for me is the gossiping and the rolling of the eyes and just letting people, behave like they do because that's the way they are. That's it's not just as bad as, but it's toxic. It's
Yeah,
kind of toxic to our
100%.
culture.
But I do think with this new wave of people coming in, this, like we've said again, it's this biggest opportunity that we've got, because I think it's not just a generational thing, because not all people coming into the services are, in their early 20s or anything like that, but just people as communities in general, we have a much greater awareness of things like diversity of thought, even diversity of gender, race, religion, all that sort of jazz, and some of the toxic roles. But I think for people that have been in the training department, such as yourself, I think that acts as like a performance enhancer, or a little like it injects an accelerant into your self-awareness, because you are forced to confront the way you come across to people, your desired outcome, your desired impact versus the impact they actually feel. And because they know no better, it relies upon you to be the moral compass for everybody in the room. Because for many people, certainly in the infancy of their careers, you are the
Person they
physical
see.
manifestation of the fire service. For every intensive purposes, you are the fire service to them. They know nothing about it, so you are embodying their image of it.
No, completely. And I think one of the things to kind of come clean on here is that I wasn't really a very good firefighter. Never really understood what we were really trying to do. I mean, obviously, I got the whole
Yeah,
concept of
yeah.
it, but
The wet stuff on the hot stuff.
I'm like, just don't really understand half of this. Then I went into training, and I was like, oh my gosh, I see now what you were actually trying. Well, oh, I get this now.
Yeah.
The drilling by. Oh, I see. Yeah, they're breaking it down into groups, and oh, I get
Yeah.
this. Oh, right. So I really it was lucky I went into training. Number one, because it actually taught me the fundamentals that I really probably should have known as a firefighter.
But again, people
Um,
struggle to articulate the why. It comes back to communication again. People can only tell you the one way that they know. And I always say, if you understand a subject well enough, you listen to Professor Brian Cox. He could explain physics to my daughter or even my nephew, because they really can understand it and they have a real solid comprehension of the why.
yes, yeah, no, absolutely. So I think you're right. I think that's what I discovered was the was the why. I probably knew. Yeah, so that was good, and I think you are absolutely right. It's that, and that's something that we have, and I'm sure other services do. But coming in, being in the training department, you are almost the conscience of the service. You are
Mm.
the people that are going to deliver training to. You're going to support the recruitment of. You're
Mm.
going to maintain. You're going to ensure that you're undertaking continuous improvement or an audit and assessment of pretty much every single operational person
Mm.
that's in the service. And for you'll do that for the time that you're in there. So I think that level of responsibility was definitely instilled in me, and I know we still instill in our
Mm.
training team.
But that personal responsibility, we can shrink this down, and I promise we'll move on in a minute because there's a million other things I want to ask him about. But we can shrink this down to the controllables, because when people do generalize and catastrophize and say the UK Fire and Rescue Service XYZ or cultural ABC, and I'm like when I used to be a watch commander on station before I came into the training department, people would say the culture's this, and I'd say, well, that's BS, because the culture is the 4 people sat around me right now. Within this confines of this room, this is the fire and rescue service. So if the culture sucks, it's because we suck. Yeah, the culture is just a collection of people. Yeah, it's not actually a thing. It's not something that lives. It's just a collection of people. So if you shrink it down, in the Stoic analogy of controlling the controllables to your own personal decisions, your thoughts and your actions, that really is the limitation of the things you can control. Then you have the ability to change that culture.
Yeah.
Because I also say, and again, these are my words, not yours, I'd always rather have a hole than an arsehole. And what I mean by that is you only takes one person on a watch to have a really bad day or have a really bad set of values, and it can ruin it for a lot of people.
No, but I think you said something there which I've started to focus on in the service, which is your you can kind of you can say, can't you, you've got this level of influence
Yes.
or control.
Recognizing your sphere of influence, yeah.
Absolutely. But what I've kind of what I've tried to kind of term it in the service is almost look at how much you've got. Look at the power of the possibility. You can influence. You've got that opportunity to influence all of this. Rather than saying to people like you're fundamentally responsible for that, that, and that. It's like no. You can influence all of this.
Yeah.
And I really like that bit that you said actually around the fact that it's rubbish.
It's not
probably
mine.
down
I
to
stole
you.
it
No,
from
but if it's
I stole it
rubbish,
from from the All Blacks. They didn't actually have that statement. Their statement is no dickheads. That's the statement for their team. And another company that I spoke with some time ago said me the second example, but it's so true. I'd rather have a gap in ability, efficiency, talent, whatever. Because I think this training is all. I always rather pick a mindset over a skill set. People say, "Oh, we can't have Kathryn. She's not a BAI. We need a BAI in the department." Look, I can teach you to be a BAI in a couple of months. If you already know how to wear BA, there's a few of the fundamentals to do, but the mindset aspect of it, and that's what frustrates me sometimes about the interviewing processes, because we can be guilty, and I don't know what it's like in your service, but other services I visit, of it becoming a tick box exercise because we want to steer away from nepotism and into more of a meritocracy. But if we are just looking for people to tick boxes, it takes the context and the color out of the person, and you can see less of the mindset and their approach, because they just become overly aware that there's a series of answers they need to give, and they learn a script sometimes. And it's very difficult not to just hire your mates, but also you do want to know about the person, but it's because it's a personal thing, it's hard to mark against that, isn't it?
It is one thing. So just a couple of bits as well is the I've started to talk as well to people that, do you know what, we all have bad days, don't we? But what I've kind of said to people is it's all right to have a bad day, but what you do then is you kind of go home and you look at yourself in the mirror and go, today was a bad day. Tomorrow's going to be all right. Have a good sleep. And then you wake up the next day and go, I'm going to rectify the things that I did yesterday. But I said, I've been saying, I don't think enough people look at themselves in the mirror and hold themselves to account, because that's the only way that you can undertake that self-improvement. and it's got to start with yourself.
The difficult questions we ask ourselves when we stick our head on the pillow at night and go, I didn't really do the thing. I should have spoke to so-and-so before I left. They seem really upset. Or, you know what? I regret what I said to so-and-so. And I had that
Absolutely,
opportunity to apologize and I didn't.
yeah.
Well, you know what? It's never too late. It really is never too late.
No, no. Something we started doing in Cornwall is base, and again, don't get me wrong, it's by no means perfect. Um, is we've looked at our I mean we kind of do the national stuff, so the general kind of written and practical bits and pieces and fitness. But then when it comes to the interview, what we do is we offer people out the opportunity to join us in a two-stage interview process. The first stage is taking part in a day's adventure in Cornwall, usually on the cliffs or the moors, working with groups of other like-minded people that are in the interview process, undertaking tasks, different tasks, and carrying different equipment. And we also get them to kind of produce a bio as well. And through the day, we get them to do different tasks, see how they interact with people, see what their bio says, see if they're an
I
honest,
love that. That
self-reflective
echoes
person.
some of the stuff we do in international search and rescue. Like it's that arduous conditions course and things. And it's not all about the fitness thing. I know you and I are
No,
big into our fitness, and people will roll their eyes. That's not what we're talking about here.
no, it's not.
It's about resiliency and but do you ever read a book called Delivering Happiness? Which
No,
sounds
I
very good
haven't.
woo. But
No.
anyway, it's by the CEO of a company called Zappos, which is an enormous American company. And one of the key assessors in their interview panel was the receptionist. So the guy or girl, and so sorry, actually there was two, the receptionist and the person that picked them up from the airport. So obviously in America, they'd interview people from all over America. And the person who drove them from the airport and the receptionist made up like 30% of the end decision.
Yeah.
And these people did have a structure to mark against. But it's like, how do you treat the people when you think no one's watching?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a great one. And I'd love to put that if I was, and I'm sure I do have an extent of influence, but if I had more influence in the decision-making process of onboarding, I would put something like that in. The people you don't think are going to mark, because they're not interviewing you, but those people get some of the truest indications of your values.
No, definitely. And that's what we find that again, you stick somebody on the Cornish coast for 6 hours and you offer them out for a little dip in the sea before you start, and you kind of give them different challenges, and you don't say whether or not the challenge can be achieved, and many of them can't, but you don't tell them that it can't. You allow them to make up their own mind as to whether or not they failed, because you don't tell them that they failed because the task might not be achievable. And you
Exactly.
and you watch the dynamic, and it never ceases to amaze me. You start off and you think, what is this going to show us? And an hour in, you think, oh wow, here we go. And it's
Well,
just
Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit. Have you ever read that book?
no,
Oh,
haven't.
Grit. So they do a lot of testing with officer training corps
Yeah.
at the names escape me, the officer training facilities in the UK. But anyway, I'm not going to try and remember them. But Grit is one of the things they measure. And there's another book called the Marshmallow Test, where they test children, and it's tested on effort rather than reward. So as in giving them an easy maths test, and children that got 10 out of 10 would be told they're a genius, they're amazing, they're really smart. But the children that worked longer and harder on tests, when they offered them the second test, everyone they told you're a genius and stuff like that, if they said, now we're going to do a harder test, the amount of children that opted out of doing the harder test and didn't work for as long on the questions was heavily weighted towards the one that were effort-based reward. So they were awarded for their effort and they would work longer and harder. And then when they did the third test and they let them mark it for themselves, there was something like a 60% higher ratio of people that lied about their results because they were recognized for the genius complex. So they were allowed to mark their own thing. And because they wanted to continue to perpetuate this idea that they're perfect, they lied more than the group that was simply rewarded for effort. And in the fire and rescue service, failure is part of the job. You could do everything right and still somebody may not survive this incident. You can do everything right and the building still burns down. You can do everything right and the flood still happens.
No, definitely. But I think Sandhurst I'm going for, by the
Sandhurst,
way.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The but it's interesting because we still strive for it for perfection. We still strive for that.
And so we should. It's the ever
Oh yeah,
elusive
yeah,
destination. That's the
yeah,
journey, isn't it?
yeah. Oh no, no, but I think and it might just be something maybe that we do in Cornwall. I think we still probably reward for or there's the perception that people want the the perfect kind of picture, whereas it's kind of like no, no, no. I just want I just want the hard work. I want the effort. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be perfect. But I think
Mm.
sometimes that's based on previous leaders maybe that have driven for they don't want the imperfections. They don't want the
No,
um, yeah.
absolutely. So, what I intended to start our conversation with, I'm terrible at this, roll us back because you actually joined as a retained firefighter in '99. Would I be right in saying that?
99, yeah, right at the very back end. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
tell me your journey into the fire and rescue service and what you
Mm.
did before you joined and kind of your decision to join.
So, I think I'll take it back to when I worked in the. Oh, no, So, how did I get into it? I think it's the first bit. So, I was working for a builders merchants at the time, and there was an advert on Pirate FM, which I didn't hear. My boss came in and said, "Why didn't you go and see about this on-call retained firefighter job? It would be great because then you could get called out and it'll give us a break in the office." And and
give
y-
us some, give us some Kathryn time off.
pretty
A
much, yeah.
backhanded compliment.
Oh, totally. So I popped down and just kind of went in, and I remember phoning my friend up, going, "Oh, I'm going to go for this on-call thing or retain thing." She's like, "Oh, what's that?" So I said, "Oh, it's like the fire service." She's like, "Oh, what's their uniform?" So I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I'll let you know in a minute." So I popped in, had a chat with the station officer, and he said, "Oh, well, this is what you do. It's what's it, 90, 120 hours, whatever it is, a week, and you have an alerter and it goes off, and you go, oh yeah, okay." And it's like paid. I was like, "Oh, it's paid. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, it's great. Well, I
Mm.
can read." Yes, I was like, "Oh, lovely."
That's still a surprise to a lot of people worldwide because
Yeah.
there's a massive German fire and rescue service. They've got 1.5 million firefighters. I think over a million of them are on call, volunteer still.
Volunteers, yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So,
Crazy.
I said, "Oh, what colour's the uniform?" They were in blue, and I said, "Oh, is it blue?" And they said, "Oh no, we're just changing to red shirts and black trousers." Oh, okay, lovely. So I left, and they said, "Oh, here's a list of the oh, could you come take some tests?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." So I phoned my friend up. She said, "What colour's the uniform?" I said, "Oh, red and black." She was lovely. I said, "Yeah, I think it's smart." Um, and then I just kind of practiced a couple of the tests, and it was the bleep test. I had to practice quite a bit.
Hmm.
Um,
What were the
and
tests for people unfamiliar,
oh,
in
so
the early
back
2000s, late 90s?
back then it was
Do
the
they still have
height
the height
test.
requirement, or they got
Yeah,
rid of that by then, or do they still have it?
no, it was, but I to this day I don't think I've ever been much over 5'5.5",
I didn't
but
think we've met a few times, so
yeah, I have shrunk, I'm
okay.
sure. But I passed the 5'6" height requirement at the time, so I'm going to go with it. And it was literally, I mean, that was back when it was being phased out.
Yeah.
I did the chest expansion, the chain pull,
That
which
was
was on
always
the
the
floor.
stupidest one, I think. It showed such a lack of understanding of physiology, didn't
Oh goodness me.
it?
The grip test was in. But because I think I'd done quite a bit of farm work and bits and pieces with my dad and bits, I'd always could pick things up and lift them. And it was the what was it then? It was the oh it was just under it's like a just under 100 kilos. It was the casualty. So the casualty, you
Yeah.
didn't have to pick it up off the floor. It was on a platform. So it kind of got put on your back, and then you had to kind of do it like a 200-meter course as quick as you
Mm.
could. And it was 9.6 on the bleep test back then.
Wow, that's high.
Yeah,
It's
I
certainly high for
know.
now. I don't think the police even have one anymore. No, they do.
Then
Sorry,
yeah.
I don't know.
So that's what it was then, and yeah, to this day I don't really know how I did, but I did it, and yeah.
I think there's many things that were unnecessary back then, but I am going to say that I think the way in which we had, and we'll get off this rabbit hole as well, but like you spent some time in training, casualties, and I travel up and down the UK now doing apprenticeship endpoint assessments for
Yeah.
different organizations as one of my side hustles. Um, so I travel up and down the UK, and a lot of casualties that I see people utilizing now sometimes are not even 40 kilos in weight. And given the ever-growing expansion of the UK waistline, it's one of my areas of concern. And I know people will again roll their eyes at it's not all about fit and strong. No, it's not all about fit and strong, but it is about realistic expectations. And yeah, I've looked at the studies, and you'll know far better than me. It is often people who are older, of poor mobility, and often overweight or have poor health that get stuck in buildings, in water, because they're not physically capable of rescuing themselves. But we don't reflect that in our training sometimes, and that frustrates me.
No, completely. And kind of without going into the details, as I'm sure you know, but the difficulty of picking, it is not because I mean the casualties as well have got that almost like that. There's made that special material that you can grip quite
Yes.
nicely, or even they got a handle on the back of
Yeah,
there,
God, yeah.
which yeah,
I've only ever met one or two humans with a handle on there.
yeah, yeah. But you're right, and I think it is that
It's about
again,
realism.
if
That's
you
all.
if you've genuinely tried to get a casualty out of a boarding
Mm.
situation or even down a set of stairs, and
Mm.
it's a yeah, it's not
I have
it's
this
not
really boring
realistic.
thing, and I won't bore anybody else for too much longer, but I have these human tests, and I do them with my children and my wife, and people might really roll their eyes now, but I would say you should be able to run a mile. And you haven't got to run it fast, even if it's just a very encouraging walk. If something happens quickly and we need to get somewhere, you should be able to run a mile. You should be able to climb over a wall. Yeah. So if something happens and we need to
And
get over this
ninja
wall to get
taste,
away
you
from
said
something, can you climb over the
a
wall?
cow in Cornwall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, something's charging at you. And if I collapsed upstairs, could you get me out of the house? Now, I know I'm 6'5" and 18 stone, but we use the bed sheets, we use the things, and my wife can do it. And my wife is a bit smaller than you. So they're just some of my basic human, and you obviously you need to be able to swim. If can you swim? They're like the 4 or 5 basic human tests, and I think they're things that all firefighters should be able to do, but it's not a requirement in a lot of places. We'll get off this subject soon.
No, it's like
So you joined in 1999.
I
You
did
joined as an
on call.
on-call retained firefighter. I love the
Yeah.
fact that you had a farming background as well,
Well,
because
I say
again,
farming, it's quite loose. We had chickens, horses, and used to do hay baling. Quite a lot of had
that's
a couple of
character building
fields.
stuff, though.
Oh yeah, yeah, driving around in the back of a horse box, throwing hay
That's
bales in
it.
the back of it when I was like, yeah, 10 years old. Yeah, why not? Yeah.
That's another thing that really builds really strong character with people. When did you move into the whole time sector?
Not that long after actually, just about 2 years later. So yeah, just under 2 years it was. And it's just around the timings really. And the second I joined, fair play to the on-call station manager at the time. He was, you need to think about whole time, need to think about whole time. I was like, what is whole time? So, what is this whole time thing? And I probably wouldn't have done, but it was the on-call commitment is incredible, and
Enormous.
yeah, and
It's a lifestyle. It
oh yeah,
sucks from I did it for 10 years
yeah,
and it sucks. And I'm not saying I loved my time there, and I think they're the most passionate people in the fire and rescue service, but
oh, it's
I
just
don't think we fully
incredible.
appreciate. And I know nationally, and you'll know far better than me, this is going through a big change of how do we solve the challenges of on call and retained and retention and recruitment, because we need to make it more appealing. We need to make it more interesting to people because they are I mean, what's the balance in Cornwall of on call to whole time?
70% on call.
That's what I
So
mean.
yeah, so we
That's
are
your service, isn't it?
yeah,
Really?
and I say to I say to everyone that joins us, we're an on-call service supported by whole time,
Yeah,
because that is
it's the truth of
that's
it.
the reality.
Mm.
Absolutely, yeah, mm,
So you joined whole time 2001.
yeah.
What were some of the big shifts in lifestyle then, and now this being a full time career and that identity shift as you as a firefighter?
So the first thing was obviously I didn't have to be on call 120 hours a week. So that was that was great. The second bit was back then, quite a big increase in pay.
I bet.
And I know we're in a very different time now.
We
And
have just nationally got on a big shift, but I know that still only goes halfway to. We'll not go down that rabbit hole, but anyway, pay's
no,
changed.
no. And it was I think the bit that I probably at that point wasn't fully appreciative of was what was the fact that was the gender imbalance.
Mm,
And I can remember joining, and this is some of the bits that I'm not saying I sat there oblivious to things, but I can, on reflection, I can remember people probably being quite derogatory and probably being quite insulting as they thought. But I had literally grown up, in the rugby club with my dad, out on the building site with my dad because he was a haulage contractor.
mm,
My mum telling me from an early age, life isn't fair. My gran being really quite a good businesswoman in the 70s and 80s. And I then went into bakery, which was predominantly male.
mm,
So there was never, I never saw, I never appreciated the inequality at the end of the day because I
mm.
just thought
It was assumed.
I'm just
Yeah.
doing the thing I'm doing, and I'm until somebody tells me any different, I'm doing it fine, and it's other people's. Yeah, so I can remember, I can remember people ignoring me. I can remember people making, doing things in
Mm,
my welfare facilities, and I can remember people being really kind of derogatory about women, and I'm literally like, well, that's clearly your problem, not mine.
mm,
And it wasn't until probably 12 6 12 months into the job that I suddenly thought, oh, hang on a minute, I get why you're. Oh, I see. All right, I get this now. I'm the first woman on the station for 15, or I'm the first woman on the station. I'm the first
mm.
new recruit, and I thought it was because I was the first new recruit for 15 years on the station that I went on. I didn't put it down to the fact that they were being that
Yeah.
derogatory
Until
and
you see the next recruit and they don't treat them like that, and you're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
isn't
It's
it?
like, oh, hang
Yeah,
on a minute,
that's
go.
obviously not a recruit thing, is it? You're just a
Yeah,
bigot.
yeah. And it was little, it was things like I can remember I ended up with the officers' toilet because they didn't have a female kind of toilet and they popped the shower in there for me and bits. And I can remember the officer going, "Oh yeah, you're the reason why I've not got a toilet," and I'm like, "I don't even know what you're saying because
Wow.
but I suppose that that kind of naivety was probably
Mm,
quite useful. I mean, people probably thought I was the most thick-skinned person on the planet because I just used to look at them and go, I don't know really about your toilet situation. I'm really sorry. So thanks very much. They must have thought, God, she's like nails. She doesn't really care.
yeah.
She didn't care
That
that I'm
ignorance is a
insulted.
powerful weapon. It just makes me worry for people that don't have that thick skin or don't have that level of personal resolve. How they because that's some of the stuff we see in some of the cultural reviews. People that
Yeah.
didn't have that, not that they were better or worse, but didn't have that same level of resiliency.
And I do think as well, that genuinely, if I suppose if I'd had the lack of, or if I'd had more awareness and that then it may have bothered me and then they
Mm,
may have continued, it might have got worse if that makes sense. And that's why, and I think in the end they were literally like, oh, she's here to stay because clearly we can't break her. And it's like,
mm.
but I never,
And look what happened since.
yeah, I know. But I am very aware, of so many people that have had just such a torrid time.
Yeah.
It's just massively inappropriate. Yeah.
I wanted to zoom out for a second because I want to circle back to that because we've met many times with women in the fire service, but I want to circle back to that in a little while and ask for people who aren't familiar with Cornwall, because this is one of my other secret excitements about the podcast is I get to speak to people all over the world and certainly all over the UK about different versions of the fire and rescue service because Cornwall is very unique in its geography, in what it's surrounded by, in again just its landscape. So you're surrounded three sides by water. We spoke sort of before we came on about the wildfires. and about how big water rescue is an aspect in your service. So could you give some people some context of, I suppose, the size of the service and some of the generic incidents? Generic sounds harsh, but some of the incident profiles that Cornwall has to face.
So technically, we're surrounded by water on four sides, but people have decided to build bridges so that
Okay.
we can connect with the other country called England. Yeah, we're basically.
You're yet to break free.
I know, as much as we want to. So we've got just in excess of 460 kilometres of coastline. We've got a static population of about it's quite small, 570,000 people, but that
It's an enormous tourist
population,
location. That's the point, like you say
yeah,
about static
yeah.
population.
Population rises. We have in excess of 4 million people that choose to come to Cornwall across about 8 months of the year. So that's kind of quite an influx.
Right.
At the height, we're probably 3 times our pop, so we probably hit in the height probably about 1 million
I would
people
imagine that's round now, around June, July, August. Would I be right?
next couple of weeks. Yeah, next
Yeah,
couple of weeks it'll start
because it's
as
beautiful down there. Cornwall is gorgeous.
no, it is. And the reason why, because again, you'll see facts and figures and stuff, we look quite expensive um, because we're covered by, we're surrounded by water, and the only people really that are going to come and help us are pirates and mermaids, and they aren't very forthcoming. So we've probably got about 10 or 12 fire stations extra to what we would have if we're in the middle of landmass, because we would be exercising our 1316 arrangements a little bit more readily.
You have to be very self-sustaining, don't you?
Oh yeah, totally.
Or self-reliant, sorry.
Yeah, and yeah, so we've got one station, it has about 13 calls a year, and you go,
Oh, bless them.
why would you do that? But the travel time, if we didn't have a station, is probably 45 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's from any other station that's kind of coming to get it. So yeah, it's unique. Types of incidents. I mean, we genuinely, as contrary to people's belief, we don't kind of burn witches, and so our incident types generally are the same, just a lot less. We follow actually the same national trend.
Oh, really?
We've seen a decline in dwelling fires, primary fires, although we've seen an increase in outdoor primary fires, which is your wildfires at the end of the day. Seen a 50% increase in those over the last 10 years. And the other incidents we've seen an increase in are supporting other emergency services.
I was going to say, what's your relationship with people like Coast Guard and stuff like that? Is it a good work? It sounds horrible to say. You don't have to say if you don't want to. But like, is it a good work? Do you work together? Do they rely on you much? Is there much training that you share? Or
so interestingly, welcome to Cornwall. I went to school with there's two of them actually, the James and Steve. So James is the head of Cornwall Coast Guards.
Love it.
And he was my first boyfriend at primary
No
school.
way.
Yeah, and Steve is his younger brother, and he heads up the RNLI, which and
He was your second boyfriend?
No, he's a bit too young for me. Yeah.
Okay.
So we and then we've got the ambulance and the police again that we work with quite a lot.
I like to tag along to incidents, bless them.
No. So we've been co-responding, so doing medical response for the ambulance service for nearly it's coming up for 30 years.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that about Cornwall. Because that's something I really tried to push hard for across the rest. And this is, we go back to our why, right? Why do you join the emergency services? If you join to help people, then I find those people are very open to co-responding. But some people just join for fun. And I appreciate there's a big union aspect of pay and roles and role description and blah, 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 blah. It's not in my role map. But I'd love to do more of that. My brother-in-law is a paramedic, and I try and regularly go out with him, and I find that aspect of the role fascinating.
We were really lucky because it's primarily it's in all on-call areas. So that station called Polruan that has the 13 calls a year, they've got a co-responding team there. Number one, because the ambulance service really struggled to get there quickly,
Yeah.
because it's
Well,
pretty
that's
much
across the UK though. So I think the same
yeah,
need is across the UK, and how, how strapped the NHS are and how difficult it is for them to recruit. And I think the average length of the career for a paramedic these days is something like 5 years.
yeah,
They get that
yeah.
cognitive fatigue and burnout, and we're all on the same team.
No,
That's all. I know
absolutely.
it's not the same budget and blah blah blah, but come on.
No, so we've been doing that so we do work a lot with the ambulance service. We've got a couple of stations that we co-locate with the ambulance. We do quite a bit of work with the police as well on different leadership courses and different training.
Mm.
And we have also got what are called tri-service safety officers. So they are people that are jointly funded by police, fire, and ambulance. It's brand new. I say it's brand new role. It's started back in 2014 when we started with one, and we've kind of grown to 13 over the past nearly 10 years.
It's
And
interesting.
that,
So, what are
yeah,
their powers and levels of training?
well, they are trained as an on-call firefighter.
Okay.
So they predominantly work in rural areas where we struggle to get day cover.
Hmm.
And if you're crewing with four at the end of the day, that's 25% of your crew that's
Yeah.
out working in the community. They are their work's predominantly driven by police logs,
Mm.
and they're part of the community policing team on a daily basis. But they've got, I think they call them CSAS powers, so community safety powers. So they've got the power of arrest.
Hmm.
However, the kind of the ethos that we talk about is, if you're ever having to arrest somebody, then you've not done your job properly.
Yeah.
And they also emergency first respond for the ambulance. So their
That
their
must be
role.
quite an interesting eclectic role, actually.
Oh, honestly, if I sit here now and I look at the role and
I'd do
think,
that.
well, I literally look at the caliber of people and go, I don't know that I would get in. But then secondly, I
Yeah.
go, what a job, what a
Mm.
career, it's an incredible vocation. And the thing that I will never be able to know is how they'll go into somebody's home and how they look at vulnerability, because they are looking through the lens of police,
Yeah.
fire, antisocial behaviour, a little bit of adult social care in there as well. They're now working with GP surgeries to do independent healthcare assessment. I mean, honestly,
That's
and
cool.
I will. It's incredible. Yeah,
You get to wear multiple hats, don't you? That's what keeps the
yeah,
job. So, and this is what I mean about diversifying our skill sets as firefighters and upskilling people with trauma or policing or general welfare or whatever it is. It's like life's boring for boring people. So if
yeah,
you diversify your role, there's I always think of it like a buffet. The society's presenting a buffet in front of first responders and going, look, we've got all these problems. Who wants to solve what? And at the minute, the police are picking up lots of different things and putting it on their plate, and the NHS as their plate is full, and our plate's not empty. But you said it earlier around cultural. Like you will be given an opportunity to make decisions for yourself, but if you sit there with your sitting on your hands and refusing to participate in the game, at some point in time, someone will take that decision away from you, and they will tell
yeah.
you what you're going to do.
No, absolutely. And I've had I mean, there's a couple of little bits at the moment in Cornwall. We've got the challenges of ambulance availability,
Mm.
and I have said until we can sort out the backlog of ambulances this time of the year, I'm just going to be on that. I'm going to be very cautious, because primarily we are absolutely here to provide fire and rescue
Of course.
statutory duty to kind of our
Mm.
communities. And the last thing I want for our 31 fire engines to be lined up behind 19 ambulances at
Yes.
our
Can't come at the
one.
detriment of what our core role is. No.
Absolutely,
Mm.
yeah. So but what I absolutely know is that our kind of people, they've turned around the other day and said, Kath, can you make us do it? Make us do it. Order us to do it. And I'm like, no, if you want to do it, then you tell your union that you want to do it.
That's it.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. That's the
and we'll,
uncomfortable aspect of it.
and we'll sit
Um,
down and we'll have a conversation. But at the moment, and one thing that probably is quite good is I've never seen there is there's quite a big national direction, national push. The Fire Minister, I think is it the Health Minister? Is it Steve Barclay? I want to say I might have that wrong.
Mm.
And Chris Phipps, the Fire Minister, they're talking a lot about closer fire and health integration. So yeah, fingers crossed.
That's a great maybe leap off point for us to step into a question around just giving people a greater understanding of the powers that chief fire officers have, because people think it's your train set, you can do what you please, but we all have a boss and we all are upholding, to communities, to organizations, to local councils, to local government, and also the money doesn't all come from the same place. So could you give people some insights into where chief fire officers, and we can be generic as we like here, where chief fire officers have to take their guidance from, and the fact that a lot of aspects of your role you can actually go to jail for as well if you don't do them. It's not like you'll just have a little disciplinary and you'll have to be suspended. There's some genuine consequences when you sit in a position of a chief fire officer.
No, there are. A couple of little bits. I think one thing I've realised is I have probably no power or say in a lot of things.
Dear.
But what I do have is a huge amount of responsibility.
Wonderful.
And I think one of the things that I've massively learned as a chief officer is waving your power stick around. I've just made that up, the power stick, but waving your power stick around and pointing at your epaulets and bits are never going to get you anywhere. And they're never going to get you anywhere with not only the people that work within your service with you, but they're never going to get you anywhere with your bosses either.
Yeah.
So, waving the stick of, oh, well, if you don't do this, people are going to die. When I'm sat, because I'm in a council service, and when I'm sat there with adult social care and I'm sat there with children's and families and schools and, going, oh, well, people might die in fires. They're sat there going, well, do you know what? Old people and children are dying every day, Kath. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whoops.
So, yeah. So it's, it's a very, what I found out the role is it's wholly and solely built on building relationships and understanding political landscape, which I never thought I would be doing politics, but I am, and I have been. So yeah, it's and do you know what the big thing I talk about a lot is there's not a book. There isn't a manual that goes, oh, how to be a chief fire officer. Yeah, like you said, you do courses and you do training or whatever it is, but you get massive interview process and what have you. But you know what? On day one, where you wake up and go, that is it. The buck stops with me now. Corporate manslaughter, vicarious responsibility. It's mine. And nobody can. Chris Lowther said it once, but no one can prepare you for that, really.
As you were moving through the service up into the position that you're in now, because it's a great point around leadership. You've said so many aspects of leadership there, and it's always hard for people sometimes to see their own best qualities. But if I asked you to consider a great leader that you've once worked for, what did you find to be some of the most interesting or effective qualities that you've seen great leaders possess?
So it's interesting because I probably ended up in the position that I'm in for two reasons. Number one, because I looked at people that led me and thought, and I'll go for tried to manage me actually, and thought, oh my goodness me, I would never, ever, ever treat anyone like that.
Yeah.
And secondly, I ended up in the position that I was in because other people kind of, apart from the people that applied externally, the people in the service didn't want the job. And I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to apply.
Oh, God.
So that's how I ended up in the job. But the biggest thing I would say is, and there are a couple of people that obviously I've seen great leadership in the role that I'm in. I see it, and I think the key bit is there's two things. There's number one is giving people your time is if somebody says to you, "Oh, can I have a chat to you? Can I speak to you?" And I think this is a learning point for all leaders, irrespective of all people, actually.
Yeah.
There are millions of people in the world that one person could go and ask to speak to. They could go to anybody, but they've chosen you. So what you need to do is you need to give them your 100% time, and you need to give them you for that period, because they've chosen you. And the second part is listening, because it's really, and that's, I think, at the height, like the level I'm at now, because it's really easy to go into a meeting or any situation where there's a group dynamic and people will stop and they'll want to know what you've got to say. Sometimes because they're interested, but more often
I
than
always
not.
call it the hippo factor.
Yeah,
It's the highest paid person's opinion.
Yeah.
Some people just they go to that.
And they don't necessarily want it because they want to know. They're not interested in what you want to say. They're interested in what you're going to say, so don't make themselves look silly. But the key bit for me is like, no. You know, it's your service. Have a chat about it. You know, kind of. And also, it's really great then, because then I don't make myself look stupid by coming in and going, "Oh, I think this," and everyone's like, "No, you're an idiot, Kath. It's that." So, two things for me: being present when people want to speak to you, and the second bit is listening.
Listening is an important one. Listening versus hearing. Some people are waiting for their turn to speak, and some people are listening to respond. Do you know what I mean? There's a but like you say, being present with someone, and that's both the verbal, the physical, the non-verbal cues. You know, mirroring, paraphrasing. A lot of these sometimes very simple skill sets that if you just apply, because most of the time, I forget who said it, but it's like people will forget what you say and they'll forget what you do, but they always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
They'll always remember how you made them feel. Did Kath listen to me? Did I feel heard? That is a real art, and it echoes again back to the aspects of podcasting and why I think they're so popular. Not this one, but all of them. It's just like people want to be listened to. They want to hear that we're not just waiting for my turn to speak so I can spout out a bunch of bloody quotes and go off down a different rabbit hole, but echoing back what Kath's just said and either agreeing, paraphrasing, challenging, or whatever it might be, but demonstrating that you've at least heard that person is rare.
No, it is. And I think the other bit though that I find pretty hard in this role is being able to then it is you've got to be honest, you've got to then manage people's expectations, because I might have heard, but sometimes my power then of influence is limited. So, but then equally sometimes people go, and I've had it, you take that time to listen to somebody, and at the end of it they go, "I know you can't do anything, but I just had to tell you." It's like, okay.
And that's it. Some people, again, they just want to be heard. They just want to vent. I'm not asking you for a solution. I'm terrible with this with my wife. Men are particularly bad at it, being solution orientated all the time. It's like, I'm not asking you for an answer. I just want to vent and just tell you my challenges for a minute.
Yeah. Maya Angelou was
Maya Angelou. Yes, it was. There you go. Oh, see, I knew you'd have known it. I wanted to ask you if there's any really poor advice. So, like, is there any common terrible advice that you've heard managers or leaders or people in the sector espouse that you think that's absolute BS? You know what I mean? People say that all the time and it's rubbish.
Oh yeah, we haven't got any money. That's always an interesting one, because we haven't got any money. But and I kind of said this to a group of new recruits recently. It's like, oh, we know that the service hasn't got any money. It's like, well, we have actually. We've got like £23 million. It's a huge amount of money. But what you've got to do is to, so I think the bit of bad advice is to not question. And I don't mean say you question everything, but I said to them, if you want to do something, I don't mind doing it, provided it's you look at something else and reprioritize it. So,
Yes. It's the
there's
same
always
argument with time, isn't it? I haven't got any time. Well,
yeah,
you have got time. Everybody's got time.
yeah,
You mean it's not important enough to you that you are going to make time for it? That's honest. Like if I said, "Oh, sorry, Kath, I didn't ring yesterday. I didn't have time." Well, you did, Pete. You just decided that, and it's not an accusation, but genuinely, you decided the other thing you were doing was more important than ringing me, and that's okay
yeah,
because that was just
absolutely.
what you did. But that is what you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the worst pieces of advice probably I hear are you almost that you've got constraint. Well, you
Hmm.
haven't, have you?
Yeah.
You haven't. There
We
are
have an
all
embarrassment of riches, and for we have
yeah,
resources, opportunities. It's never been as much as we moan about the problems. There's never been such a great time to be alive as now, really, in many
no.
ways.
Oh, it's just yeah. So it's about how you then choose to
Hmm.
create the opportunities or use things.
I wanted to ask you around some of the challenging puzzles for leaders in the emergency. And I know we've kind of puddle jumped across a few of them now, but is there anything particularly you think we need to do more of, or things that we specifically should stop doing to try and ensure? Because we're facing really big challenges in the fire and rescue service with recruitment, longevity, getting people into the sector, many, many, many challenges that the communities want us to solve. Is there anything that we specifically need to do more of or stop doing to try and face some of these challenges?
So I think probably what I would, and we'll never be able to know this, but to understand the impact of reduction in prevention work.
Hmm.
I think
It's a
if
tough one to
we,
quantify, isn't it?
oh, it is, yeah, and it's an absolute nightmare. But I think if we even look pre-COVID and at kind of health, I know you're into your health and I am, but you look at the way people live their lives and just not even the way people live their lives, but the amount of food options that are available to them. And you think this cannot be, it must be linked. There must
Yeah.
be a link between the fact that people do eat more processed food. We
Stevie
tend
Wonder
to,
could make he could see that, couldn't he? To be honest, I know we say we struggle to find a tangible link, but come
yeah.
on.
People tend to drink more, smoke more. Not necessarily smoke actually, but vape. Our ability to live a healthy lifestyle is
Yeah.
inhibited by, Netflix. But so by Netflix, not just Netflix. But just
And those are accelerants to the degradation of the general society. And we, as the emergency services and first responders, are the ones standing at the bottom of the hill, catching everything
absolutely,
that comes rolling down.
yeah. So I think what would I like us to do more of? I probably would like us to genuinely look at how do we stop the avalanche that's coming down the hill. So
Mm.
an increase in really targeted prevention, but not just fire, that real thing about how can we use fire, like
Mm.
you said, the great ability we've got to,
We've got
uh,
such a USP. We've got an
oh,
incredible product
totally.
that was
Yeah.
made long before you and I were ever born. We are standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
We owe the cultural position of the fire and rescue service to incredible people that have come long before us. But we're now the bastions of that, and we can use that
Oh, to
position
help.
for
Yeah.
many, many great
Yeah.
things if people will just
Absolutely.
get over themselves and think it's not just about fires all the time.
No, so there's that. There's the how can we genuinely utilize the resources that we've got for the greater good of the increase in vulnerability that we've got. And I think the other bit would be around kind of almost we used to do quite a bit of youth intervention work, so
Yeah.
increasing kind of cadets, Prince's Trust, just that we are incredible role models. We
Mm.
are predominantly men, and our men actually, again, there are a lot of families out there without strong male role models.
Absolutely.
And
People talk about toxic masculinity, and they do a lot of damage with that phrase.
yes,
Whereas I
yeah,
think, whilst again we're striving for constant differences in diversity and inclusion within the fire and rescue service, we do still have some wonderful male role models in our communities. I had a really petrifying listen to a podcast the other day. Sorry to go down a rabbit hole, and this
okay,
might upset people, but it was an interview with a child sex offender, and this is challenging for people to hear. But this person had many they were in prison, they're a paedophile, and they were interviewing them about society and about targeting children. Very, very strange conversation, but fascinating in the same way. I said, how do you target children? What do you look for? What's the character traits? And they said, oh, it's not really much about the child. I tend to look at the social dynamics. They said, if there is a lack of a strong male role model in that person's life, then that person is an easy target. And I'm not saying that if firefighters are going to reduce paedophilia, I'm not making such a tenuous thread, but I just think that if we over-index on this aspect of toxic masculinity, then we can unknowingly damage some of the really positive role models that we have in our life, both men and women, but just positive role models in general.
No, and I think that's the bit is about, what is our, it's about understanding we know we need to improve diversity and all of those bits and pieces, but actually, what have we got right here, right now? Well,
Yeah.
what we've got are a group of majority are absolutely incredibly passionate, committed men.
Great moral compasses, good
Yeah.
cultural values.
Oh, will do anything to help anybody. And why are we not, like you said, using that USP to increase the amount of youth engagement? But I know why we're not, because of money and finance. But I did say, didn't I, that I shouldn't use that as
I
as a
love that
blocker.
self-accountability. Yeah. We just need to get enough
blocker.
people on board to agree the priorities. But no, I
Absolutely.
absolutely love that. You said something
Brilliant.
earlier which stuck out in my mind and I noted it down. It was right at the early beginning of our conversation, and you said, it's not really about motivating myself because it's really easy to motivate me. That is something that I wanted to cycle back to and shine a really big light on, because I think that is much rarer than you think it is. How do you motivate you? And I know I'm not trying to get into a woo-woo high five Tony Robbins conversation, but why are you so easily motivated? Why do you not struggle in that respect? Because I'm sure you do have your struggles, because that's a very difficult thing with people in very long careers in emergency services. They have a lot of setbacks. They have a big cognitive load. We see some of the best and worst aspects of society. How do you stay motivated?
Um, I think because there probably hasn't been maybe a handful of days that I've actually woken up. Well, no, every single day, apart from a handful, I wake up and I mean, every job in the fire service is a privilege. I mean, it genuinely gives me goosebumps when I kind of talk about it, because we get to go into people's homes and we see people when they are just at the point sometimes of
Life is unraveling fast.
when they are breaking or broken, and you
Yeah.
think, so I have been chosen, given the opportunity to help given the skills, given the opportunity, and given this moment in this big thing of life that's crazy, from this period of time, to be able to go out and help people when they need that. And that's a privilege.
Really is.
And that, I look at it and go, as my career is quickly, and it does go quicker, I'm sure. But I'm now sat there going, hang on a minute, I've probably only got 5 years left, and I've got 5 years left to, to leave this privileged role in somebody else's hands, and that probably frightens me a little bit more. That there's just so much to do all of the time. But that's what I literally wake up and I quite often say to my cat, I can't believe this. I've got the best job in the world and the best place in the world. And
I love what you said there about seeing people at their best and their worst as well, because it's not a pleasure at all, but it does widen your spectrum of appreciation, doesn't it? You're like, wow, when your analogy of a bad day, I would say the worst thing that ever happened to you is the worst thing that ever happened to you. So that's where your spectrum lies. But we do have a very unique lens that we look through as a first responder, that you actually do see a different version of the worst day of someone's life, and you go, oh yeah, I'm nowhere near that.
yeah, no, absolutely. And you said then about you see the best of people as well, which is
Yeah.
when when a crew comes together or crews come together and they, again, it's just incredible to see. The fire service in action is again a privilege to be a part of.
It's like being behind the scenes on a high performing team. Again, when you see someone go through something really challenging, and then 10 minutes later or 20 minutes later or later that day, you see them interact with somebody and go, wow, how are you able to do that? I just saw the thing you did 3 hours ago. How are you there? Do you know what I mean? That is really, really inspiring when you see people's ability to do that.
No, definitely no. So that's why it's easy. because best job in the world, best place in the world.
Kathryn, I've absolutely loved that. Thank you so much for your generosity in spending over an hour and a half with me entertaining my silly questions, because I just think it's so powerful. And, you know, when we've seen each other a few times at WFS, people won't know I always talk about the life cycle of a guest, because I historically meet so many incredible people, and you will as well. And then I'm stuck with an eternal feeling of guilt because I just want to share that person's perspective, that person's inner story, that person's way of looking at the world. I almost want to capture it in like an audible time capsule and then throw it at everyone that ever wants to listen to it. Because this is the morbid thing. Like, I'm most excited of in 6 years' time when you've retired and people can still come back and listen to this. That is what I'm most excited about, because this will live forever as long as the internet's around. And that's quite a surreal thing.
No, thank you. Thank you for your time and allowing me to answer your questions, which I enjoyed very much. Thank you.
The Firefighters podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, and please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.